Elizabeth Swanson, who is a research associate professor at the University of Texas at Austin, and particularly works at the Meadows Center for Preventing Educational Risk. I am old enough to remember when the Meadows Center started at UT Austin. I wasn't really part of it. I was on the board, I guess, because Sharon Vaughn was just nice to me and felt sorry for me, I guess. But got to meet a lot of great people and work with her grad students who, Elizabeth, you were a grad student at the time when I met you, and folks like Jeannie and Jade and all those people who are now have gone on to faculty positions. But anyway, the Meadows Center especially, and Elizabeth in particular, have been very successful obtaining external funding. Just want to invite Elizabeth today to share with her some of her insights. We're not going to get any magic secret formula, because if there was one, we wouldn't share it with anybody anyway, because it's heavily competitive. But just some tips on if you're interested in IES funding, how to go about it, what are some things to avoid, things like that. So I'll let you take it away, Elizabeth. Thank you very much. And if people have questions, I'd prefer if you keep yourself muted while she's doing her talk. If you have something that's really urgent that you need answered during her talk, please use the chat function, and I'll be monitoring that. And then at the end, we'll save some time for questions. So, all right, great. Thanks, Elizabeth. You can take it away.
Okay, that sounds great. Okay, well, first of all, I'm just glad to be with y'all, and I'm so happy to see Dan. Yeah, Dan and I first worked together in the early 2000s, and I certainly enjoy working with him. I hope y'all do too. So it looks like there are about six folks, and myself and Dan, who have joined, and I'd really like to know a little bit about you all. So would you mind quickly just introducing yourselves to me so I know who's joining me today? And how about, John, why don't you go first? I can see y'all's names. That's all I can see.
Sure, I'm John Romig. I'm a assistant professor in special education. I graduated from the University of Virginia 3 years ago, so I'm in my third year and getting my third year review this year. And I study mostly writing instruction and writing assessment for kids with disabilities.
Great, welcome. How about, let's see, Amanda Olson? I see that name.
Hi, I'm Amanda Olson. I'm also an assistant professor. This is my second year at UTA. I did my doctorate at the University of Missouri, and then I did a postdoc at the University of North Carolina. I'm a quantitative methodologist, so I do like statistics, measurement, stuff like that. Thanks.
Great, thanks. Let's see who else. Paul?
Hi. Paul Polanco. I am an assistant professor of bilingual education here. This is my first year. I got my doctorate from Southern Methodist University nearby here. And I look at longitudinal outcomes for bilingual Latinx students in terms of education, economics, and social outcomes.
That's great. Thanks. How about, let's see, I see Christopher.
Hello, my name is Christopher Cribbs. I have a joint appointment in the math department and curriculum and instruction at UTA. I've been here since 1997.
Wonderful. Nice to see you.
Thank you.
Who else? Let's see here. Vandana, is that how you say your name?
Yes, hi. I'm the graduate research assistant in the Ideas Center. I'm also a doctoral candidate in the Educational Leadership and Policy Studies program at UT Arlington. I hope to graduate, or I will graduate next May.
Wonderful. You're almost there. All right, let's see here. Is it Juhi? Juhi? You'll have to say that name for your name for me.
Hello.
Hi.
Can you hear me okay?
I can.
Sorry, I'm at school. So can you see me too?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, I'm Juhi Lee, and I've been here like 17 years. And my area is early childhood mathematics education. And I'm currently interim chair. Thank you.
Oh, great. Thank you. Okay, so I see a person, very beautiful person. Yes, but I don't see your name. So you'll introduce yourself.
Was that me? I'm Robin.
Yes, that's you, Robin. There you are.
I am an associate professor of literacy studies here. I'm actually brand new to UTA this fall. I spent the last 5 years at the Citadel in Charleston, South Carolina, and then I did my doctorate before that at Vanderbilt. My work focuses mostly around educational technology. So started with multimodal composing, but more recently more focused around computational thinking and making.
Wonderful. Did I miss anyone? All right. It is so nice to meet you all. Thank you for doing that for me. It gives me an idea of you know, who's with me today. So just to let you know, I have some notes because I want to make sure that I give you all kind of the high points, some critical information. So if you see me looking down, that's what I'm looking at. So today, most of the presentation will focus on IES. I really want to show you how to find funding opportunities. I want to tell you a bit about the role of the IES program officer, because if you know a little bit, you can really kind of advantage yourselves of the program officer. And then I want to point out some IES resources for you to be sure to study, because their website can be overwhelming. So I just want to point out what's most important for you. And then the second part of the presentation really is just some touch points on what I think are keys to successful funding. And before I go any further, I want to tell you that I purposefully planned for this presentation to be kind of a high altitude look at grant writing for IES. I hope that by the end, you get a jumping off point, that this is kind of like the springboard for you, and you know which way to head when you start thinking about your own projects. So that's my goal for today. What that means is that you'll probably end up with about 10,000 questions that you didn't know you had as of right now. That's okay. But my hope is that the information I give you gives you a place to look for the answers, all right? What a way to start a presentation, right? You're going to end up with more questions at the end. Okay, so to tell you a little bit about my funding history, to date, I've served as principal investigator for projects funded by IES and the Texas Education Agency, and they total a little over $4 million now, but I have that bottom project there that's under review right now with IES. And then I've served as co-PI on several projects totaling more than like $25 million. And you see that big award there at the bottom, that $20 million award, that's the project where I had the privilege of working with Dan on a few projects. And really he helped us shape the intervention that we ended up testing through RCTs and subsequent funding. So here's my kind of funding history, and really what it's done for me. Oh, I have to say that this was only possible because I joined a group of very talented researchers and grant writers. And so over the years, I have just learned so much from them. And every time I ask, you know, how did you get started in grant writing? Every single one of us says the same thing. I grabbed the RFA, the request for applications, the RFA, I followed it, and I just tried. And that's all you have to do. So here we go. You probably have some really interesting research ideas, and IES is the place where our center has found a lot of success aligning our research interests to funding. So that's really where the search starts, is with an idea. So for our presentation today, here's the idea that we're going to work with. And it's like, you know, we have these conversations with colleagues all the time, and they sound something like, oh, I really want to develop an intervention that combines teacher training on second grade reading instruction coupled with classroom management. And then, you know, you just sit there and talk about it. And that's where you start. And I'm sure all of you have had these conversations. So this is the idea that we will work with you, or that we'll work with today. All right. Let's start with understanding a little bit about the IES structure, because if you understand this, it will help you refine your idea and write your proposal. All right. So, oh, I didn't mean to do that. Why isn't it? Look at me showing y'all the entire presentation. Here we go. We're back to where I need to be. Okay, so here over on this other side of the screen is the IES Funding Opportunities website. And this is your hub for everything, grant writing for IES. IES has two funding streams. One is the National Center for Education Research. That is for general education research. And then the National Center for Special Education Research, that's for special ed research. And you find the two funding streams here. Here's the education, research, and training, and all of the different RFAs. And then here is NICSR, or the special education stream, and all of their RFAs. You'll also notice that these are all closed now because these were for fiscal year 21, and they name them, that means fiscal year 21, IES names their competitions by the year that they will be funded. So you write your proposal the year prior. We've already written our fiscal year 21 proposals. The next competition will be fiscal year 22, all right? So now what you want to do, we almost exclusively apply under the education research competition. So let me click on that. And what you see are many topics. So this is under the general education stream, and all of these different topics: career and technical ed, educational technology. You notice it wasn't competed in 21, but we'll see if it's competed in 22. Effective instruction, literacy, you get the idea. So when you click on one of these, you get a lot of good information. Under each topic, you have your program officer. This is their contact information. You see the link to the RFA. And then this is where you got to start. Step one is to read over these topics. They give you history and background of the topic, why the IES thinks they're important, related projects and related publications. And you want to read through those, because what you're trying to do is find a topic that matches your idea. And then back over here to my slides, there are 4 different project types. There are measurement projects. That's where you'll develop and validate new measures. Exploration projects, that's where you're really examining relationships between learners, educators, school, and policy characteristics. These are not causal impact studies or intervention development. Those come next. This project type, development and innovation, this is if you want funding to develop an intervention. And this final one is initial efficacy and follow-up. This is where you want to go if you need funding for your randomized control trials. It doesn't have to be RCTs, your quasi-experiments, your qualitative work. This is where you find that funding. Okay, so let's take a look at our example. Remember that I want to develop an intervention, and the intervention is teacher training. It's for second grade teachers that teaches them how to implement effective reading instruction and boosts their classroom management skills. So because it's a general education setting and study, I would go in under the National Center for Education Research funding stream. And then from the topics, there are really 2 that might fit. I could either go with effective instruction because it's focused on teacher training, or literacy because I want to focus on reading instruction. And then as far as the project types go, because I want to develop an intervention, it's a development and innovation grant. So now, how do we decide on the topic? And this is really where the IES program officer, one of the ways that they can be very helpful. So one of the ways, they can do some things, they cannot do others. So that's what I want to kind of tell you a little bit about on this slide. They can help you identify the correct topic area and project type that best fits your idea. So for this idea that I'm sharing in this presentation, I would call the effective instruction program officer, and I would actually call them because they're more likely to tell you information over the phone than through email, because email is considered public record. So they have to be exceedingly careful what they write in an email. So I would call them. So I'm going to call the effective instruction program officer, and I'm also going to call the literacy program officer. Run your idea by them, and they'll help you decide which topic area to apply to. What they cannot or are not supposed to tell you is information related to the merit or the fundability of your idea. Now, this is a really kind of gray area and fine line. They want us to get funded. They want the IES to fund good work. And so they will tell you a lot of information, but when you start noticing that they can't tell you about merit or fundability, that's why they're really not allowed. And then some things that we'll talk a little bit more about later, but I want to highlight them now. The program officers are present during the panel meetings where reviewers score your proposal, but they cannot comment on your proposal or influence scoring in any way. But because they're there, after the review process, they will talk to you about your reviews and what the reviewers thought of your proposal. They won't tell you how to improve your proposal. Okay, so they're useful, but there are limits to what they can do. I think, yeah, let's do one more slide here and then I'll pause for questions, okay? So one more thing that's helpful to understand when you're writing your proposal, it's helpful to understand the road to funding with IES. With IES, you're going to pull down the RFA, you're going to follow it to the letter, and you will submit your proposal. The first thing they do at IES is review the proposal to make sure it meets the RFA requirements. If it does not, it's the end of the road. It does not go to the review panel, and you don't receive any feedback on your proposal. They tell you why it didn't go to panel, but that's it. But if it meets the RFA requirements, it goes to panel review. This is a group of researchers and previously IES funded folks who review the proposal, and they discuss it and score it. If your proposal is scored at equal to or less than 2.0, then it is in the fundable range. If it's above 2.0, it is not funded, but you receive reviews. And by the way, that 2.0 threshold is usually what they use, but they move that sometimes. One year it had to be at 1.7, other years they've bumped it up, okay? So now it's in the fundable range. What happens next is they have, during their review, they've come up with questions. They call them queries, and you receive them by email. You clarify and answer the queries and send it back to IES. And if you do a good job with that, then you receive your funding email. If you don't do a good job with your queries, which that happens sometimes, you don't get funded, but you receive your reviews. And you're always welcome to resubmit your proposal. So let me pause there. Are there any questions?
This is Christopher. I have a sort of a broad question. It's
Sure.
specifically about anything that you were just saying, but it's about IES and the
Yeah.
kinds of things they fund. The projects that you listed that you've been involved with that were IES funded, they're all pretty big.
Yeah.
Does IES tend to fund only these like really big systemic change study kind of things, or do they fund at all different sizes of project?
They do fund all different sizes, Christopher, and we just feel like if they're willing to give us $3.6 million, that's what we're asking for. And we balance it out to the penny. Like, we don't want to leave a penny on the table. But that being said, they will fund smaller scale projects. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Elizabeth, can I jump in? I know that
Of course.
there is a difference between the 4 different goals of IES in terms of the annual allocations of dollars that they set aside for each of those goals. And although, like maybe goal 1 or goal 2 sound like, well, that seems a lot easier than goal 3, they usually don't allocate as much money, and those grants tend to be smaller. Is that correct?
That's right. So let me kind of go back to the four project types. Yeah, measurement projects usually are allocated the least amount of money. Those just aren't as expensive. And then exploration projects, I think the threshold this last year was $2 million for those projects. Oh no, I'm sorry, excuse me. Explorations are also small. Development and innovation, last year for fiscal year 21, those were at around, but I think it was $2 million, but I'm going off of memory. And then the efficacy trials were at like the $3.6 million, because those are so expensive to run. So expensive. Yeah. Thanks, Dan.
And the competition is also greater for 3 and 4, right? Because even though they're going to give 2 million or 3.6 million, there might be more of those awards. So the total pot of money for the awards in 3 and 4 is much larger than that for 1 and 2. So I just wanted to caution people, don't get overly excited about 1 or 2. I mean, it's worth pursuing. If you can get a $300,000 grant, that's better than nothing. But the amount of money they put in those pots tends to be a lot smaller than the ones in 3 and 4.
Yeah. And y'all, this is where it differs from year to year because, we're just never sure what will be allocated to IES until the federal budget is passed. A few years ago, the federal budget literally gave 0 money to IES and there were no competitions. So it's like, that was a rough year, but you just these are kind of things that you have to kind of track and keep track of. But I will say that the RFAs usually come out in May, sometimes June. So that's when you'll see this website updated with the new RFAs. All right, let's keep moving along and jot down your questions for me because I want to answer them. Okay, so now I want to point you to some IES resources that are essential for you. So let's see here. The first thing that I want to point you to on this website is this section, Steps to Applying for IES Grants. I review these every single year because even though I've been writing grants for a while now, things change. And so what I would suggest for you all is to carefully take a look at each one of these steps. In particular, number 2, funding opportunities webinars. These are so helpful. So I clicked on that link and take a look at the on-demand webinars. If you're going for funding with IES, you've got to watch all of these. Here's a basic overview of research grants and information for new applicants to IES, but I have to tell you, I watch this one every single year before I start writing. Here's the IES grant writing workshop, the IES application process, what happens after submitting an IES application. And then this one I watched just a couple of months ago. It's a video of a peer review panel meeting. So these are really important. You have got to watch these. And then let me go back here and show you two documents that you need to become very familiar with. First is the application submission guide. Now this one talks all about how to physically submit your application, which your Office of Sponsored Projects at UT Arlington will probably do for you, but you want to read over this application submission guide. You don't have to study this in depth. I would read it a couple of times and highlight the important information, because even though you have OSP helping you, you've got to make sure, you've got to know enough to make sure they're doing it right. Now, the second document, now this thing you are going to read and reread. I bet you I reread this thing no fewer than 20 times while I'm writing, and it's the RFA. So let's see here. Let me show you. Yeah. Here's what the RFA looked like for fiscal year 21. And this is through NCER. So this is the general education one. The special education one is formatted in exactly the same way. So let me just show you a few highlights. And this is where you might want to take some notes, because I'm going to show you what is, frankly, of utmost importance in the RFA. So here are, here's the table of contents, obviously, but you can see the different project types, award limits. These are things that, of course, you want to read. Here are descriptions of all of the different topics, the project types, and these are the 4 project types: measurement, exploration, development and innovation, and initial efficacy and follow-up. And you've got to read these carefully. Preparing your application, these are things about general formatting. And I got to tell you, if you break the formatting rules, they will not send your proposal for review. So use the correct formatting from the beginning and check it a lot. You don't want to get it bounced back because you used the wrong spacing, for example. It tells you required appendices and other narrative content. So this is very important section. But here's what I really, let's see here. I got to get down to, oh, here's what I want to do. I'm going to scroll back up. And I'm going to take a closer look today at the development and innovation section. And this is the tip that I want to give you. And this is probably one of the most valuable tips monetarily that you have to understand. So here's what it tells you. Requirements for your narrative. When they say it must include 4 sections, significance, research plan, personnel, and resources, those are literally what your big major headings are going to be called. Significance, research plan, personnel, and resources. And then first, they give you like this little overview of what each of these sections are. I find these slightly helpful. You need to read over them. But this is where the money lies. In this section called Recommendations for Strong Applications. So this is your first section, Significance, and it tells you in detail what you must have in your significance. So when I write these, each one of these items becomes either some sort of heading or subheading. All right. So take this one, for example. Describe your proposed intervention, its key components, and how it will be implemented. So I have a heading that says proposed intervention. I describe it broadly, and then I say key components until it's key components. And then I have a heading that says implementation, and then I describe how it's implemented. And I just do the same thing. They don't have to be in this order, but you really need to clearly show the reviewers that you've included all of this information. And I do that through using carefully written headings. And I mean, it just goes on down. Research plan, here's your first major heading, sample and setting. And then here are your subheadings. Here's your second heading, research design and methods. Oh gosh, there's a lot in there. And then here is your third section. It's the personnel section. And then, God, I mean, they tell you exactly what to put in these things. And then your resources. And this is your institution's, yeah, this is basically proving to the IES that your institution has the capacity to manage a grant of this size. And any UT institution does. The answer is yes, absolutely. We have capacity at our institution to manage a grant. You just have to show them why you think so. All right. I just can't emphasize how many times you need to read, highlight, note, and check your proposal and this RFA. It is absolutely essential to getting funded. So let's pause again for some questions. Okay, so I don't see any questions, and are there some in the chat here? Oh no, none in the chat. Okay. So in this next section, I'd like to share with you two things that I think are really important to kind of advantage for a successful application process. And both of these items are related to collaboration. And it's because, you know, it cannot be understated that that grant writing is not a siloed activity. There is no possible way that I could ever write a successful grant proposal by myself. And you should not feel that pressure either. But it does take a little bit of planning. So first, let's talk about support you need from your institution. One group that will collaborate with you is called the Office of Sponsored Projects. They'll officially submit the proposal for you, but you make a note of this, please. Make sure you ask them for the timeline that they want to follow to get the thing submitted on time so that you can plan backwards accordingly. You'll also work with them to identify the indirect cost rate. This is a charge from the University of Texas system to allow you to conduct your research at their institution, is basically what it is. I think they word it a little differently, but that's basically what it is. It covers things that you'll use to conduct your research, facilities, technology, the library use, things like that. So right now at UT Arlington, if all of your work is on campus, UT Arlington will charge you 51.1% of your grant award to do your work on campus. If your work is off campus, they will charge you 26% indirect cost rate. And by the way, that's the same at UT Austin. The default indirect cost rate is 51.1%, and you have to make a case for your off-campus indirect rate. So if you get to this point And I don't want to go into it today, but if you get to this point and you are kind of wondering how to make these arguments successfully, email me. I will share with you what the documents that I have used to successfully argue the off-campus rate at the University of Texas at Austin. All right, so keep my email and I will share that information with you. All right, second bullet. You also need someone to help you pull together a budget. You are responsible for developing the budget, but you need help with it. I've never developed a budget without someone's help. There are people at the university who specialize in grant budgeting. Your Office of Sponsored Projects might have someone, they might assign you someone. I'm not sure how it works at UT Arlington, but you got to find somebody. And then finally, you need a colleague to read your writing and provide feedback from a reviewer's perspective. So what we're not covering today is grant writing, but I will say it is different than any other kind of writing that I do in my career. It's different than article writing. It's different than, report writing. It's just different. And what I've learned over the years is that I've learned that it has to have three features. It has to be compelling, kind of like, and actually I've read up a little bit on journalistic writing because they're compelling, right? So I've read up a little bit on that to use some of their writing techniques to make my grant writing more compelling. It has to be clear. Whenever we have not been funded, but we've received reviews and I've talked to program officers, every time they've said, this is the point where people got confused. So as soon as you confuse the reviewers, you're kind of done for. So it's got to be clear. And then it's got to be concise, because these reviewers review like 7 to 10 different proposals. You've got to state your points in a compelling way, clearly, and very shortly. You've got to get to the point real fast. So to me, this type of writing was new to me, a decade ago. And feedback that I received from peers and mentors was absolutely critical to my first project being funded as a PI. So find somebody who can do that for you. Dan, are there any other essential supports at UTA that you can think of that they need to know about?
Well, obviously we don't have quite the infrastructure here at UT Arlington and the College of Education as you guys have, and I should say at UT Austin, you guys have two things really that we don't have. One, you have a huge center, the Meadow Center, that employs a lot of folks and brings in a lot of money. And in my time there, it was hands down the place to work with if you wanted to try to get funding, because you had a lot of, like you said, very experienced people who knew the grant process, were very good at budgets, were very good at editing the work and so on. And, that's priceless. We got a special ed postdoc training grant there that I had submitted as a regular training grant the year before and didn't get funded. And I am absolutely convinced that once I attached Sharon Vaughn's name to it, the writing didn't change much at all, but it got funded. And I think, the thing you haven't mentioned today is there is some degree of influence in terms of experience and, reputation and things like that. So, it makes it kind of harder to get your foot in the door, but that's also good motivation for finding people who have had some experience and success getting grants and working with them, kind of like you did starting off. You were a co-PI long before you were a PI, correct?
Yeah,
and
that's right.
You learned the system by being a co-PI first before you took on the responsibility of being a PI. So, and then the College of Education at UT Austin also has, at least some infrastructure for helping people with grants, much more so than we have in terms of, our Office of Research is pretty much my office. And if you've ever walked into my office, there's there's a comfortable couch there, but we don't quite see the research infrastructure that other places have. We're working on it, right? We're working on it. So one of the things I did, as long as I'm dominating the conversation, Elizabeth, I remember something Sharon Vaughn told me years ago when people would come up to her and tell her that, oh, I got off the phone with the program officer and she really is excited about our proposal. And man, I just feel so great today. I'm gonna go out and have a glass of champagne. And this is so great. And Sharon told me the program officers are excited to get any proposal submitted. One of their jobs is to elicit a large number of proposals and applications, right? So don't get too overly excited because like Elizabeth said, their job isn't to comment on the fundability of your proposal. They are to encourage you to submit. But you can get some useful information out of them in terms of fit, like Elizabeth said. So I think that's useful stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. They have no bearing on whether or not you get funded. Yeah, that's the fallacy. They get all excited, which makes you excited. And then someone tells you, oh, they're not voting, by the way. Okay, so to the point of Dan's, well, actually, this next slide here is about building a winning team. And I think the first thing that we all have to really realize is, which we already know this, because we're really, as we moved through our schooling into the doctoral level and postdoctoral work, I mean, arguably our interests narrowed over time, and really we've become experts at something relatively narrow. But IES is not looking to fund one expert. They're looking to fund a well-rounded team. So, I didn't mean to do that. So you need to think about the team. For me, I think about the team in three ways. I think about building a team that meets the needs of the project. I add people to the team that are related to any specialized topics or populations that I'm working with, particularly if I'm moving outside of where I've worked before. And I'll give you an example in just a second. And then finally, I add people who meet the needs of the RFA. So I'll tell you about that in a second too. In fact, let me show you how I built this team, and then I will show you, I opened up this screen from IES because I want to show you a couple of things about finding folks to work with. So this is a project that is will be under review in fiscal year 22. Strive is a professional development model. It's distributed over time, and we teach teachers how to use vocabulary and reading comprehension practices in fourth grade social studies classrooms. We just finished conducting the first round of efficacy trials with really great results, and now we want to replicate it in rural schools. So first, we build our key personnel team. So these are the people who are legally, fiscally responsible for the entire project. On this project, I'm serving as PI, and I usually, once you find a group of people that you really like to work with, you'll probably stick with them over the years. And there are two co-PIs that I really have found enjoyment and benefit in working with. And one of those is Sharon Vaughn. She was my doctoral advisor, and she serves as a fantastic co-PI. Even if she wasn't my doctoral advisor, and when you're looking for co-PIs, look for someone who is, I mean, to put it just frankly, who's really smart, who's willing to collaborate, who doesn't want to take over your project, but instead really wants to collaborate to make a really great project. Those are fantastic co-PIs. And then my other co-PI that I work with a lot is Greg Roberts, and he is an outstanding methodologist, just outstanding. He's very helpful. He writes a lot of the analysis sections for my proposals. So that's another key area that I like to have a really strong person is leading the analysis and the research plan more broadly. And then you have your group of personnel. Now these are people who are gonna carry out the project. I always hire a project director, and I try to get one full-time if I can into the budget. I always include multiple graduate research assistants. IES really likes that. And then I also include a lead methodologist. And in this case, I have Nancy Skamaka join almost all of my teams. Remember back here, I said you need to get people on board that meet the needs of the RFA. Nancy is one of these examples. One of the requirements that became new, gosh, about 6 years ago is the requirement for a cost effectiveness analysis. Well, that's a particular type of analysis that frankly, a lot of people in the field of education are not trained in doing, but Nancy is. And so I include her in my personnel, and I explain to IES why she's so valuable to the team, because she does cost-effective analysis. You've asked me to do it in the RFA, and I have somebody who does it. And then I have an assessment coordinator. That's the person that's in charge of gathering the data. You know, like literally going out to the schools to gather data from kids. And then I have a database analyst. She builds and maintains all of the databases for the project. And then we have a graphics manager at the Meadows Center. But even if I was not at the Meadows Center with an in-house graphics team, which by the way, I really have never talked to another colleague at any university that has an in-house graphics team, by the way. I would go find a graphics person to join my team. And I would tell IES that it's important because IES expects high quality dissemination. And I mean, someone to do all of your graphics design, it makes it look fantastic. So I think that's an important personnel. Let me flip back one more time. The second bullet, I include people related to specialized topics or populations. And let me show you how I did that on this project. I did that through paid advisors. So when I think of advisors, I want experts and what Dan said, well-known names in the field on my advisor team. And you don't have to pay these folks a whole lot of money. Just ask what their daily rate is and then pay them like 3 or 4 days per year to be on your advisory team. And really, you are asking them to advise you. In this case, I asked Susan Sheridan. She's at the University of Nebraska. She does a lot of rural schoolwork. And I asked her to join the advisory team. And then our methods advisor, because this is a replication study, I invited Elizabeth Tipton to join us. Where is she? Is she at, I've drawn a blank, and that's embarrassing. I think she's in Minnesota. I don't remember. Oh, she is exceedingly well known at IES related to generalizability and replication studies. So you can see how to build, you have to build these robust teams. Now, where do you find these people? I want to show you something that I use a lot on the IES website. And I literally Googled, look up funded projects at IES, and you get to this page. I Google it all the time. I should save the thing. But this is how I do it. Look at this. You can look up the awardee. So if you want to work with somebody not at Texas A&M, at the University of Texas at Austin, you can say you want to work with somebody at the University of Texas at Austin. And then you can hit search, and it'll pull up all of the UT Austin funded projects. let's say you want to work with someone right up the street from y'all at Dallas. Here are the ones funded at Dallas, and you can see who's been funded. But here's the other feature that let me kind of clear this out. Here's what I really like. You can look up people by principal investigator. So let's see, one of you is at SMU. Yeah, Paul was at SMU. So you might know Stephanie Alateba. And you might think, oh, I know her. Let's see what has been funded for her. And you can take a look to see what's funded. I mean, you can find out everything about her project. Here's a brand new one, Project Grow in Literacy. Let's see what that's about. You can read, look, there's her co-PI. There's the amount she requested. I mean, you can find out everything about her project. See if she's a colleague that you might want to partner with. If you're just interested, let's see, here's someone, let's see here. So here's someone, Stephen Chulo, he works at Texas State University, and he has been funded, and you can see the project that he was funded to do. This is an exploring writing instruction. So this is a fantastic way to see who you might want to partner with. Now, just for fun, since we've mentioned her a few times, let me scroll down to the V's. T-V, V comes before W. Okay, let's look up Sharon. All right, so here's Sharon's list. You can kind of see, where she's been funded over time too, which is fun. It's fun to look at new researchers at smaller universities like Steve Chulo. It's fun to look up these, heavy hitters of these big universities to see what they're doing. It's fun to look at folks like Stephanie Alateba, who are kind of mid-career researchers, see what they're doing. This is a wonderful way to find colleagues and partners. I'm going to pause for, actually, you know what? Let me show you one more thing, because this is my last slide, and then I'll open the rest of the time up for questions. But I just want to show this to you because I really want you to be patient, to be persistent, and to be committed to improvement. But most of all, I really want you to be encouraged to just try it. Just do it. Like, you're never going to get the funding if you never send in an application. Just do it. Here is the funding story from my most recently funded project. My colleague Jade Wexler at the University of Maryland and I co-developed this, what we call the AIM coaching model. It's an adaptive coaching model to support a school-wide literacy program. School-wide literacy plan, excuse me. We applied through NICSR, so that's the special education funding stream, and it's a development and innovation grant. So for fiscal year 18, that meant, y'all, we started, our first application was written in 2017. Remember that. So for fiscal year 18, that was our initial application. The score was strong, but it was not funded at 2.18. We received our reviews and we thought, you know what, those are reasonable. We can address those. We addressed the reviews and we resubmitted for fiscal year 19. Y'all, we were so close. Scored again, not funded, 2.09. So we read the reviews again and we thought, okay, we can do this. Let's do it again. We addressed the reviews, we resubmitted for fiscal year 20, and it was finally funded. So y'all, it took us arguably 4 years to get this thing funded. And frankly, that's kind of typical. If you hit on the very first try, then you should really celebrate, because that is a unique experience at IES. So, like I said, be patient, be persistent, be committed to improvement, and be encouraged. Go for it. All right, that's it for me, but I am here for a little while to answer questions. Any question you'd like about IES grant funding? Oh, may I just say one more note of encouragement? What Dan said about the infrastructure at the Meadows Center for Preventing Educational Risk and at the College of Education at UT Austin is true. We have built out some extensive infrastructure to support grant writing and award, both pre and post award. But I also want to say that that situation is exceedingly unique. At the University of Maryland, I work closely with Jade Wexler there, and it is more like what Dan described. The research office is like literally someone's office. She does not have the huge infrastructure that we have at the University of Texas at Austin, and University of Maryland is a Carnegie One university, and they don't have that. So do not be dissuaded, and don't be, I want you to kind of think past that, because you have an Office of Sponsored Projects who I know can help you. And you have all these colleagues, and you know how to find them now on the IES website.
Elizabeth, let me jump in and break the awkward silence while my colleagues think up their questions. But I really like your last slide. And I used to do presentations on tips for getting published, and I would talk about the 4 different decisions you can get when you submit a manuscript. One is reject outright without an invitation to resubmit. It's like, this is so terrible, we don't even want you to revise this. It's beyond hope. And the second one is revise and resubmit, which is pretty